I would put there's almost the financial ROI is I can pick out people I'm working with today that I got on their radar because of the content or the subjects I've talked about. So if they want to hire an FD, they've they've instantly got what I will slot into their organization or their investment portfolio or something. So there's the ROI financially is, I would say, 90% of the fees I earned this year probably come from people who gravitated towards me because of me telling stories, which is quite powerful. But I think the non-financial ROI is even more powerful, which is I am actually putting myself out there in the first place and building relationships with people that I think are just more fun and maybe just a bit more authentic. And also I'm sharing vulnerability through some stories where I think that's more satisfying. It's not, we don't need to necessarily go through where everything has a financial ROI. It's the non-financial ROIs that almost make things more fun, relationships better, deeper, stronger, and also maybe more resilient. And yeah, just this kind of continuous personal development doesn't stop. So it's almost people come to you for advice on doing certain things, where I could look at myself and just point them back to where I started. That we're all on the set, like back to what we were saying, we're all on the same journey. For people to come to me, there's quite a nice ROI element to that as well.
Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Ciaran, with Sergey, you've met a few times in the past in the academy, maybe mainly for Kelsey's benefit. Before we get into your communication journey, tell us a little bit about you, what you do. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Andrea. Nice to see you, Kelsey. Nice to see you as well, Sergey. Yes, my name, same fame, game, aim. Yeah, I'm Ciaran. I call myself a virtual finance director. So I am a finance director for startups or early stage companies. I've been doing this since 2010, mainly to avoid a midlife crisis. And since then, I've worked with over 100 startups across mainly technology space, but branching into many different sectors. The same issues pop up time and time again. And my work's been recognized by industry peers, and I have been shortlisted for Accounting Excellence Awards in the UK, and I won an FD CFO of the Year award back in 2019, just before I met Andre for the first time. And I had this epiphany that I needed to, instead of just brushing up on my technical skills and keep myself relevant, I really wanted to do something about my presentation skills and make myself a little more interesting to my audience.
Perfect. Ciaran, thank you. Thank you very much for that, for the introduction. And now you mentioned, and this is for Sergey and for Kelsey's benefit, Becky, I think it was in 2020, Ciaran and I worked one-to-one together. And like, was there, what if you think about if we think about your journey, we've got before, during, and after. If we start with before you decided to start working with me, or maybe if you've done something else even before we worked together, what happened? Was there a specific moment that triggered your motivation to start your journey towards improving your communication skills?
There was, if I can take everyone back to 2020, and you might have been in a lockdown for part or on two different occasions in the UK. We had a lockdown in March 2020 and later in 2020. And I had two moments. I posted a video on LinkedIn, which I thought was brilliant. But I posted a video, and at the time it was just me. My camera was on my desk, and it got a really nice warm reaction from a lot of people who had never seen me on video, never seen me do anything, because a lot of my LinkedIn posts might have just been images or text. When I looked back at this video, I thought it was many ums and ahs. It was poorly structured. It didn't really have a point. It was quite empathetic to the challenge a lot of people were facing. So even though it got such a nice warm reaction, I just thought I can really improve on this. it was just a bit uncomfortable looking at myself. But I knew I planted a seed, I was going to do something about it. And the second epiphany I had was also in 2020. My 7-year-old was doing a school poetry competition, and she was a very shy kid, stuck to my leg at birthday parties. She was in this particular poetry competition in school. She would have to get up off her chair, walk across the room, up a stairs into the middle of a stage, and say the poem. And in this poetry competition, around 25 kids all said the same poem. And I felt that if she can do this, I should be able to do this. And in the back of my head, I've always had the phrase, never turn down the opportunity to stand up in front of a room full of people, because the process of doing it is never easy to everyone, even if they're a well-seasoned professional. People still get a little nervous standing up in front of a room. But by doing it and never turning down the opportunity, it will become a little easier and a little easier and a little easier every time. And also the message and the delivery becomes a little more impactful or lands a little better on the audience that's listening. So yeah, so in 2020, these two moments together was, I don't know how you came across my LinkedIn feed, Andrea, but it was a well-targeted algorithm where I was like, the easy next step was to do something about it and join one of your webinars.
Okay, so that's what happened, because then I don't even remember all the details. So then the next step for you was to join one of my webinars, and then from there I remember we had a conversation, and you decided to commit to the program.
The best thing about becoming a better speaker is that you don't go from nothing to hero status in one step. It is all about simple, easy steps. So that first step was just come to one of your webinars. And then the next step was just reach out to you to say, I think I'd like to brush up on my skills. And then the next step. So I think it's just been a great journey, even though it was 5.5 years ago. It's a great example of just sometimes the next step doesn't have to be a big, unreachable hurdle to get over or step to climb. It's actually a very simple thing.
It would be great, Ciaran. I'm thinking about what you said, the first moment that you mentioned, the video that you posted on LinkedIn. If you are open to it, and knowing you, I think you might be open to it. If you still have access to that video, I know that it's many years ago. It would be great if you could post it on a platform, on a private platform, on Circle for everyone.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it still exists. And I guess I'm very comfortable that it exists because it was who I was then. And I have quite a few people. We can obviously cover some of the things I've done since, but I do have no problem with it still existing. I think we all have a bit of a digital footprint, and we all have, I say, uncomfortable, not in a bad way. We've all got things we've learned and developed along the way. We all look different to when we did, 5, 10, 20 years ago. I think there is an element here as well of owning your own story, that if you have come from not being the best polished speaker or the posting a video, I don't want to make it sound like it was that bad, but we all come from somewhere. I'm very comfortable about other people who've reached out to me to say, I'd like to become a better speaker. When I say, well, if they look at what I do, which is not perfect because we all know it's just a continuous process, but I can give them something where I started. And they can see that they're starting from maybe a better place, maybe a worse place, but they've got to start from somewhere. And by starting, just one example, I was umming and ahhing a lot in that video. So it was just a personal journey to become better at not umming or erring. And others have different challenges, different little habits and bad habits to overcome. And that's all part of the process at the same time.
I can relate to that 100%. There are so many videos of myself online way back years ago that if I watch them now, I feel embarrassed. But it's you're right. They're still there. They're part of the journey, and it's fine. I think I don't know who said that, but there's a quote. Someone said, if you watch your work like 5 years ago, it could be a video, it could be something else. and you don't feel embarrassed, maybe you haven't made enough progress. So it's a good thing.
There is in the startup space, there is a piece that if you're not embarrassed about your website, if you're not embarrassed about your product, your packaging, your branding, you're not moving fast enough. So
Exactly.
yeah, I could see it as a personal level as well, where it's like climbing a mountain. Sometimes you just look at the trail, and then every so often you turn around and you go, "Oh my God, look how far we've come." So even though you think you haven't actually walked far up the mountain, just simply turning around and looking backwards can remind you as to how far it is. Not necessarily that it was 6 years ago or 5 years ago, but just as a person, it might be your delivery or my delivery. It might be the subject is just a better structured. It might be the clarity of thought. It might have a better structure. So, for example, on that day, I felt I wanted to say something, but I didn't approach it how I would approach a beach talk that I would do today that has a very kind of clear or much clearer structure to it that I've thought about in advance and I've maybe tweaked it. On that particular day, it was a bit more of an unstructured ramble. Not that the viewer had a problem with it, but I can see the difference.
For those who don't know what you mean, but I know what your beach talks are, but for those who don't know, what are your beach talks? And also, how do you approach them now? You need to make one of your beach talks. How do you go about it now? Well, what are some of the differences, some of the changes that you've made since then?
Yeah, so I guess the during by working with you, it opened my eyes to that becoming a better speaker was either a presentation to colleagues, it's most likely going to be online, but also it gave rise to this opportunity that maybe I could do my own videos and I could just post them to my community on a subject that's relevant to my community. And the beach talk was, or my beach talks just purely came about by pure chance, I guess, in that every week I would drive my kids to their ballet classes, and the class is an hour long. And on the Isle of Wight, there's a beautiful kind of beach, sheltered beach close to where they do ballet. So I would go off for a walk for an hour, and then I guess I just shot a video one particular day, and then I did another one the following week, and another one the following week. And even through that mini series, I guess by looking back at my stories, they started to take shape because I was becoming a bit more structured in how I planned for these beach talks, what I was going to say, why was it relevant, was there a twist or a plot twist, what was the consequence or what was the outcome. But also, I think in the world of where maybe in the last 5 years, the world of kind of authentic, being yourself, not trying to be someone else, just take your own intellectual property and do something with it. These beach talks, just talking to camera, gave me an opportunity to share far more about myself with my community and with my existing or prospect clients just by posting them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe in 2020, I don't really think that um, the, well, certainly not on my radar. The words that have really come about in the last 5 years is authenticity is very important, but know, like, and trust are really big words. It takes a while to build these things. It takes not a lot of effort to lose them or damage them. So in the world where we're all trying to build and maintain know, like, and trust, being a better presenter and not being shy or uncomfortable to be yourself is a journey. It's not a kind of a 5-day crash course, but by being comfortable to practice it and also have a practice where I become a better presenter maybe every time I do one, but also my audience gets to see something every time I post one.
Yeah. And Kieran, on a practical level, I'm just curious, how do you go about preparing your beach talks? In the past, normally, so you've got your ballet class, your kids' ballet class, you know that you have it maybe next week. what is it, like a few days before you think about a subject, and then you prepare a high level structure, you prepare a script? How do you go about it?
Yeah, great question. I remember when I did your course, I became very familiar with the 3 act play of having a kind of a before, a during, and after. My ears became very kind of tuned into people when they were telling stories, the structure of telling a story or learning to tell a story or even a presentation is to not have a kind of a linear approach to everything where people can start to switch off. It would be great to, for example, in a 3 act play, having a before problem, a living or an existing with this problem as to what is the challenge, and then overcoming the problem can have for the audience who follow your journey, they can feel, well, you're sitting in a pain point. How are you going to get out of the pain point? And I felt the stories was the same, where I would literally have a Google sheet, and anything I thought, because I work in the world of finance, many things happen to, there's many analogies, there's many subjects that are closely related to finance, where finance is actually quite a dry, boring subject, but there's many things that are just on the edge. Like, for example, climbing a mountain has nothing to do with managing cash flow, but there's an analogy that you can directly link to when I have climbed a couple of big mountains. What have they got to do with startups? Or what has taking a cold shower got to do with cash flow forecasting? So I would find that I would allow myself to be creative, and whether I was in the shower or walking the dog or folding washing away from my machine, and I would think of these things, I would just make a note that these are things that maybe I can turn into a presentation or a story. So a beach talk is probably no more than 5 minutes. I feel there's got to be an element of trust between a viewer and what I'm talking about to follow my content or listen to my story. If someone's going to give me 5 minutes of their precious time, I don't want to abuse that time. But equally, I don't want to rush through the content at the same time or the story and shorten the impact of the story. So I felt that I've ended up at around the between 4 to 5 minutes is my optimum time to tell a story. And also what I found is when I started working with you, you did mention the words internalize and rehearse, which were so new to me because I used to try and learn everything by heart. And I wouldn't feel I would need to deliver a presentation word perfect. And it does take a little bit of time and a bit of practice and self-belief, and obviously trusted you and your teachings, that you can get to a place on a subject that you are very confident in. You can actually trust yourself to internalize the subject. So if I do give a beach talk, if I was to do a beach talk and record it on my phone, and I was to do it again 20 seconds later, I would probably give a slightly different talk every time. So the main subject I will, or story flow I will follow, but the choice of words that I use or the timing or the personality will allow me to become authentic on camera rather than feel I'm just reading off an auto cue or a teleprompt.
How many, because you mentioned rehearsing, normally before a video like this, or it could be even in a different context, if you need to deliver a webinar, a presentation, how many times do you tend to rehearse?
Well, a 5 minute chat's quite easy because if I'm driving, I can talk to myself anywhere. So I could be folding washing and I could. So if the word, maybe it's a case of I would do it multiple times so it just flows. So there's no word or sentence that I could get stuck on. And the wonderful thing about a beach talk is if I was delivering it straight to camera, the challenge of straight to camera is it can allow for it to be a bit more tense. You have to remind yourself to breathe. You have to breathe low and you have to have gaps. The lovely thing about a beach talk was because I was walking, it would allow me to have these completely normal or trust in a completely normal pause. And I think maybe this was a learning opportunity, was to find a format that I was comfortable in and also my audience were enjoying as well. So I feel like there's no one format necessarily that fits every person on the planet, But if you have a presentation or a series of stories, whether it's technical or personal, to find a format that you feel comfortable delivering. So yeah, I found that before I started working with you, I would feel I would need to memorize it like I'm delivering a play and it's someone else's words. And the transition was, because they're my words, the audience doesn't know how I'm going to deliver them. It's not like the lyrics to a song where it has to be delivered because everyone knows the words. You can't just make up new words and deliver the song. The song's written. So I find that the giving the talk can allow me to just get the words out, but I'm comfortable about what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you mentioned a few things: internalizing, rehearsing, the three-act play, which could be part one, part two, part three in a story, in a presentation, in a video. You mentioned the power of analogies. Are there any, and you don't have to have something else, but anything else that comes to mind in terms of either lessons that stuck with you? And they don't have to be lessons that you learned from me. It could be like in your own journey in general. Analogies, the three-act play, internalizing your message. Anything else that you've learned? Any specific communication devices or strategies that you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, the two that come to mind are words that came from you. The first one came from you, which is what, so what? And I love it is that if someone tells you something, as a listener, you might go, so what? Not in a bad way, but just it's a great prompt to yourself to say, so what? Like, why is the person going to listen and lean in to this thing you're talking about? And it's lovely. So sometimes you might say a sentence in your head, you might hear the listener will say, so what? And the next sentence gives them the reason why. And I think that's quite powerful to get somebody to kind of care, lean in. I think the ability to get a listener to stop for 5 minutes is quite important. To get them to lean in is even more important, and to stay with the journey. And that lends itself to the second piece, which is if you can get somebody to lean in. I've been spending or learning more how to tell a story. I love the idea of sometimes just adding a sense into the story to describe where you are, what's going on, how did it smell, what can they see, so you can actually bring the. So if you're in a meeting room, don't just say you're in a meeting room, but the meeting room could have smelt like the meeting that just happened beforehand and needed the windows opening. And now everyone can kind of feel, yeah, we're kind of feeling like we're in the meeting room with you, wanting to open those windows, rather than just saying I was in a meeting room.
Is there
Sometimes,
something
so
that particular, sorry, Kian, that particular detail that you've just mentioned, is that something that you've learned from Bernadette?
yes. So just by adding a sense to something. So there are nice little simple tools to help the reader feel like they're in that moment with you. So if you want the reader to feel in the moment, by adding in senses can really help them feel like they're in the room. And these little details can be very, very easy for people to um to apply, to test, to try, to have fun with. And the nice thing, yeah, Bernadette Jiwa she runs a storytelling group. And what I've really enjoyed about it is I think it's a building block on what I've learned from working with you, is that there's no endpoint, and there shouldn't really feel like an endpoint to presenting or becoming a better storyteller. It's just another skill set that you can play with and you can continue to have fun with as you kind of just progress through your work as well as through your personal life. The two intertwine. Sometimes we want to know the people or the person behind the professional. So there's a great opportunity through content and through telling stories and sharing this, not necessarily oversharing for the sake of just getting clicks and reactions, but actually just sharing genuine, authentic content can be very heartfelt. And it doesn't have to necessarily show vulnerability, but we're all human. We all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have learnings. So where I am in telling stories, just as an example, Bernadette's community have there's a group of us that decided that we would create this thing called Story Bridges, where every month somebody, not me, but someone within the community will come up with a prompt. And it's amazing, even with one simple prompt, how many people will tell a completely different story about that prompt. But the prompt can have a wonderful therapeutic element to it as well, as telling a story, you can actually process a pain point you had with a customer. You could process, but it's not a rant. You're not coming in and saying, this customer just annoyed me. It could just be a story where you have to take a viewer or the audience through some sort of story arc, because as the storyteller, I know how it's going to go, but the listener doesn't until they listen to the story. So it can actually be quite a powerful method to get people to not just lean in and give you 5 minutes, but also they hopefully will learn something about me. They might learn something about the story or the theme. They might learn something about themselves in the process of doing so.
And thank you for giving me the idea of using prompts. That's why we started using prompts for some of the sessions here. And by the way, for Sergey, for Kelsey, Bernadette, Jiwa, you find the name in the chat. She's the author of, she's an expert in storytelling, and she's an author of many books. I've read, I don't know about you, Ciaran, I've read Story Driven by Bernadette, which is an amazing book. I haven't read the others, but Story Driven is amazing. And Ciaran, in addition to principles, strategies, again, you mentioned stories, adding a sense, which is a bit, sometimes adding a detail to a story brings the story to life, like a sense, and analogies and the three-act play. Beyond those principles, if you want, are there any resources or tools that either you use at the moment or that you've used in the past in your communication journey?
I think I think I'm just very open to whether it's a YouTube video. I'll give you some examples, but whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's a TED talk, whether it's a book, whether it's being a confident presenter, whether it's Bernadette and how to tell a story, I feel bringing them all together. My mission was to kind of use all these tools and then do something with them, not just read them and then just not do something. The practicing and the doing has become actually quite a lot of fun. The really powerful bit is that sometimes if everyone here on this call wrote down their kind of 5 core values, things that are really important and personal to you, they can either sit in you or you can do something or show them. And I think I'm now at a stage where maybe stories are a very powerful way, and presenting is a very powerful way to actually show what's important to you, to show people and to do it. So if your core value was honesty and trust, well, I mean, do you want it to live inside you and no one else knows that that is a core value to you? Or can you do something about it where you can show and do your core value, not think your core value? So I found that that's been super powerful to progress, I guess. Being a presenter is not just the technical skill of becoming a better presenter, but by actually doing so, you start to present about subjects where you would never have gone before because it's too big a task. But by being more confident and more enjoyable with whether it's face-to-face or whether it's on media, you can actually approach subjects which everyone can personalize to themselves. And actually that becomes all the stuff that maybe you're sitting on, your true intellectual property, can connect you with your audience, whether you are making mostly work presentations or whether, like me, you're just putting content out there, which is marketing for future clients or existing clients. It becomes quite a powerful layering. And I suppose what's driven this is, if you think about some great movies, most of the movies follow the same story arc, but where they tend to differ is where they start you in the story. So, for example, you might start with somebody who's just walking down the street and it's a normal day, and then something good happens for a while, and then something, just think of a rom-com. Good stuff happens for a while, and then bad stuff happens in the middle, and then by the end of the movie, it's going to be okay. But hopefully that, I don't know where I am on camera, but hopefully that they will end the movie at a better place to where they started. That tends to be the Hollywood finish. And then there's other things in life where the person could start like really at the bottom. Like I'm thinking Cinderella, where life isn't good. You've lost your parents. You are down in the kitchen. Everyone shits on you. You're in a really bad place. And if you take, and obviously she finishes in an amazing place by the end. And what's quite funny is that if you apply to any subject that you might be presenting, whether it's work related and quite serious, or whether it's personal, you do have a choice as to where do you start the story. Are you starting on a high? Life is brilliant. And then it falls off a cliff, and then you end up back to where you started. Does life end up with your problem, sitting in your problem? You're actually quite low down on the scale and you finish, life is just okay. Or are you at the same place you started? You actually have a lot of choice to think about. Where do you start your story and where do you end your story? And you're in control of the journey in between. So hopefully your listener is either listening to your pain point at the beginning. Life's okay. I can go through life, Andrea, without even taking another presentation class in my life. I'm asked to give a presentation. Shit, I'm in now stress. Then you know what I mean? You can actually add so much more life to your story by just remembering as the teller, you're in control of where you want to start the story and where you want to end it. And then you're in control of the journey you decide to take people in between.
Before we continue with this episode, I just want to share a few resources that I think will be super useful for you. The first one is check out either my book, Confident Presenter, or my colleague Phil Wakenall's book, Business Presentation Revolution, or both. These are books for business owners and leaders who want to take their presentation skills to a higher level. To make the most of the books, take the Confident Presenter Scorecard, which is an online tool that allows you to assess your presentation skills for free in less than 3 minutes. And then also, at the moment, I'm running a series of free presentation skills web classes, and I'd love to see you there. The links are in the show notes. Now, let's go back to the episode. Where you want to start the story, where you want to end, and being control in the journey, being in control of the journey in the middle. Can you give us a bit of an example of how you apply these insights in your own subject? Because I'm thinking like Sergey, Kelsey, they communicate on things that are very much work related. Also, you, Ciaran, you said it at the very beginning, you talk about finance and accounting and all these kind of things, numbers, and you said it using your own words, it can be a bit boring. And then you use those storytelling communication insights to make it more engaging, to make it a little bit more practical. Can you try and give us an example of how you apply these insights in your own subject?
Yeah, great question. I'll share it in the group. One of the prompts I had last 2 months ago was, it's all about trust. And I told a story about a client where, I won't spoil the story, but it was a personal story to me where I was working with a new client, and it typically followed how I work with new clients. Not quite a Cinderella story, but it was effectively, this was going great. This is how I onboard all my clients. And then something changed in the story. And I guess even though it was about me and my particular client, I got a lot of messages from people who also had an issue of trust with somebody where they had invested time or invested personal expertise or something with a client, or actually just tried to work with a client, but either they didn't trust their client or the client didn't trust them. And it was a very relatable subject very quickly, that everyone believes that trust should exist in every relationship. It doesn't always happen. And I guess, so I guess as a story in my head, when I was thinking this prompt, it's all about trust, there are probably quite a few different stories I could have told within the finance space where the relationship between a finance director or an accountant and their client doesn't exist. But I felt confident enough to be able to tell a story about the only time something something has gone wrong. And I can own the story. If I
Yeah.
don't tell the story, I don't own the story. It just sits inside and starts eating at you. And I felt it was okay and comfortable for me to practically take a subject and talk about something quite openly.
Did you say you shared it in
I
our
put it on
group?
LinkedIn. No, I put it on
Oh,
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn.
but I'll share within the group so you
It'd
can.
be great if you could do that because again, people also those Kelsey, Sergey, but also those who watch the recording, if they want, they can go deeper
Perfect.
and see how you've actually you are applying those insights in your day-to-day communication.
And you might not be able to pick up from that particular story, but Bernadette has a scaffold that a story should have a context. So where do you land the listener in the start of the story? There's a catalyst, so something has to happen. There is a change. So there's a hero of the story, what changes? There's a complication, and then there's a consequence, like what was the outcome? So you can actually take the listener through 5 steps very quickly in a story by having these different elements to them. But you need to make it easy for the listener to understand where are we at the start of this, and these steps as you step through it, where are you taking them so you don't lose them. But also the consequence is quite important, the 5th step, because it means that the listener actually hopefully can go on with the rest of their day understanding that there's no unanswered questions. So you have to sometimes make it easy for the listener. As you always said, it's their presentation, not your presentation.
Yeah.
For that reason. So if you tell a story, whether it's a video, whether you're actually giving I have in the back of my head you telling me, just remember it's their presentation. And it's important when you're telling a story, obviously you have to be personal and tell your story, but you do have in mind that there is a listener watching this.
You said it's yes, it's their presentation of yours. Also, before you said a key lesson you've learned is the so what. It's not
Yes.
just the what. What is okay? What's the key message? What do I want to communicate? Fine, that's important, but it's not enough. So what? Why should they care? Why is your idea, your message, your subject, the problem that you are describing? Why does that matter? Why is that relevant to the audience? And I also wanted to, I'm curious, Ciaran, was there, if you think about again your journey, your improvement, was there also thinking about, you've been talking about story arcs. So in many story arcs, you have a bit of a turning point towards the end. Was there a turning point for you where in your journey you realized, oh, well, actually, I'm making some progress here. I can see my communication is more effective. Either a turning point or maybe it was more of a gradual process.
Yeah, I'm loving these questions. The way I summed it up was when it really matters, just say the bar is set really high. And it could be a work presentation, but for me, this bar in my head was a family event, and it could be a happy event or it could be a sad event, but it's a family event. Wouldn't it be amazing to stand up and tell a story? And the thing that's very powerful about it is, I suppose, is you take steps to just bring the bar down where you are more comfortable to be able to tell the story. So that's been the personal motivation, is at some stage you'd like to stand up in front of a room full of people, back to what I said at the start of this conversation. So I turned 50 back in March, so 5 months ago, and I had a room full of people, maybe say 90 people, 100 people in my house. And I thought in advance of this would be a great test. Now, I don't regret anything in life. I'm one of these, sorry if I'm sound annoying. I've not had a perfect life, but I don't regret stuff because it kind of makes me look backwards. But I would have probably regretted not telling a story. So I thought about this and I had a story. I think I shared it with you afterwards,
You
right?
did,
So,
yeah. And by
but
the way, Ciaran, by the way, again, I don't want you to share everything, but if you want, it would be fantastic if you also shared that.
I could try and merge it.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can merge it, and I would be more than happy to share. But for
Or maybe
Kelsey, for
a
Sergey,
link. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could, if I can do that, I will do. And for
Because
Sergey,
that was a great video, a great story. Yeah.
thank you. And so the thing that was really important for me was I knew all my friends from conversation. I've spoken to my friends, and but even though they're friendship groups, a lot of these people haven't worked with me. They don't really know what I do, really, and they don't really know, do I present well. So I felt that maybe telling a story, back to the what and so what, is that if I'm going to do this, I need to do it comfortably, so they're comfortable. It can't be awkward, and also it would be a great opportunity. What I what I really enjoyed was that I did it. I didn't die. I had chosen a story that had a nice twist in it, and it had a slightly humorous theme. But also, what I really enjoyed about this thing was I created these moments of tension that I had not really thought about or appreciated. So, for example, when I stopped talking for 3 or 4 seconds, I was looking at friends looking at me for 3 or 4 seconds, going, "Oh my God." The room was total silent. I couldn't believe it. So sometimes just through the ability to tell a story and introduce a pause and a moment of silence was just fantastic. It's hard to explain, but it was cheap and free to insert a pause. I didn't have to do any work in that moment. I didn't have to say anything, and it was wonderfully. Yeah, it was a wonderful moment to have 100 people in your house and have complete silence, waiting for the next line. And actually, it's not as if there was a punchline, but I guess Sergey and Kelsey can listen to it. But there was a moment where I can't quite believe the reaction or the reactions I was getting from people, because people were listening. There was a total hush.
They
And
were
I
laughing
felt
as well sometimes because
laughing.
yeah.
They were kind of sledging. So part of the story was people were not heckling, but like people were contributing comments and stuff, which just was fantastic. I could not have scripted it. So even though I had pictured in my head that I wanted to reduce the bar to stand up in front of a room full of people, that this was something that I knew I had been planning for quite some time. I knew when I was going to turn 50. Everyone else just thought I stood up and walked and took up a microphone and told a story, which is lovely if that's what they want to believe. But that's the nice impression is to make it feel that that's just what happened physically. Whereas behind, I had put a bit of thought into what I was going to say and the ebbs and flows. And I had shared it with the story group that I'm part of, just to get people's reaction to certain things. And just to finish on that, there is a story, kind of an equivalent of a comedy club called the Moth,
Yeah.
Moth, which is famous in San Francisco, but they're all over the US. There's a few in London that they pop up where people turn up on a theme of put a story, put your name in a hat, and if your name gets called, you stand up and tell a story. So I haven't done that yet, which I think I need to try and find one in London to do. I think that would increase my heart rate a lot more. But it just goes to show that if you want to um, keep progressing, speaking, presenting, storytelling, there's always something more. There's always the next thing, and that's okay.
Ciaran, you mentioned inserting a pose. You've done that in front of 100 people, and it felt wonderful because you could see that they were paying attention, they were waiting for the next line. Now, that could be inserting a pose, or it could be any other communication skill that you've developed over the years. Are there any skills that feel or felt easy or easier for you to develop, or are there any skills that felt or felt harder for you over the years to develop? And
Yeah,
I'm thinking about skill like specific skills like okay, posing
yeah,
or eye contact, these kind of things.
yeah. Another great question. The slow breath is so powerful and so simple. So your good friend Jimmy Cannon, he has a great tip, which is if if for example you took a pause and you believe that pause is 5 seconds, you've probably only paused for maybe 1 to 2 seconds. So the person pausing will feel like it's eternity. The audience will feel like just it's just a small break between sentences. So a pause can be very powerful just to practice, and is okay. Nobody looks at a speaker who pauses and just goes, "Oh my God, what's going on?" it is so normal for an audience to look at a speaker pausing. The amazing thing about a pause, what Jimmy has as a very practical tool, I guess, to practice, is the inhale through your nose, but you have to inhale without making a sound. So if you want to take a good, decent breath in through your nose, it will take 5 seconds to do this without taking a sound. So you can do it very quickly, but everyone's heard it. But if you do it really slowly, no one's heard you. And that's long enough for you to get a breath, take a pause, slow down your thoughts. The next sentence that you were going to say is going to come because you've had 3 or 4 seconds to allow it to come. And if you do that 3 or 4 times, or maybe 6 or 10 times in your presentation or your story, it allows you to be more relaxed, because every time you take a slow breath in through your nose, physiologically you are calming yourself down every time, as opposed to, even if your energy is up and high when you're presenting, it can, as I know, it can lead to a dry mouth. It can lead to trying to line up your thoughts very quickly. It also, as we all know, it can allow your audience not enough time to digest what it is you've been talking about. So a story obviously can have a flow, but if it's a technical presentation, sometimes you need to let the words just sit with the audience, and a 5-second pause could be your best friend. It can allow them 5 seconds to just process what you've just said. And you can have the most wonderful, slow inhale through your nose that will just calm your heart, calm your blood flow, calm everything down, and just allow you to line up the next thing you're going to say.
And for everyone here and also those watching the recording, we had a session with, Ciaran mentioned Jimmy Cannon. It was maybe, I think one of the first sessions on the academy where, so Jimmy Cannon is a voice coach, and we looked at a few, it was a mini voice coaching session. So if you go to, for everyone, if you go to the events page on our community, and you scroll down, you will see a session with Jimmy Cannon on voice skills. And now, Ciaran, I'm curious about your relationship with feedback, because someone like you've done, for example, you've worked with me, with Jimmy, you're part of Bernadette's group, you constantly put your skills into practice, you put yourself out there when it comes to communicating, presenting, storytelling. You must have I guess a good relationship with feedback, receiving feedback. Have you ever thought about these, your approach to getting feedback, acting on it? What's your relationship with feedback?
Yeah, it's a subject where I think by taking feedback on, you can get very comfortable with receiving feedback. The key thing for me is whether you want level 1 feedback, level 2, or level 3. So level 1 might be, yeah, it was good. It's not really useful. Doesn't really tell you anything. It's just a quick reaction. And level 2 feedback, if you ask somebody what you really think, they might go, well, kind of enjoyed it. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I liked it, but that's it. And then if you say, well, is there anything else? And you go to level 3, they might say, well, there was that bit that you said that, and you might have changed that. I think you could have brought us in maybe your story a little deeper. You might have just held us in a moment a little longer. You might have finished it slightly differently. And it's a bit more of a feedback where it's well intentioned. Someone is keen to share some wisdom or something practical, something I could test or try or play with. So sometimes level 1 and 2 feedback really, it's a bit distracting. It can be positive, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't necessarily give you the things that you want to practice or learn or reflect on. Level 3 feedback from trusted sources can be very, very simple and powerful and well intended. So I think, I'm 50 now, but I think going through midlife, being open to receiving feedback is more important than ever. I feel with the dawn of AI or the progress, the positive progress, as well as the challenges of AI, as well as being a little older and having some very talented kids coming through in their 30s and 40s, there's an element of using all these feedback loops to become an even better version of oneself. It shouldn't stop. And I think I'm doing stuff because I have taken on board feedback.
You said just now, it shouldn't stop.
Mm.
So progress, improvement shouldn't stop. What's your approach to this? How do you keep, because you started your journey in 2020, so it's been like officially, it's been at least 5 years now. What do you do? How do you go about? And of course, you are part of this group as well, but in general, even beyond this group, how do you go about making sure that your progress never stops? Progress from a communication skills perspective.
Yeah, I think it comes down to some sort of practice and enjoying it. So, for example, 2 years ago, I wasn't telling stories, I as well as I'm doing now, but I was telling something that resembled a story. And I felt that by learning something or a fresh skill of how to tell stories and practicing it, I feel like it's brought me more fulfillment as well as producing content for clients. It's also helped me, for example, just through story prompts, almost process life moments because it can trigger a story prompt can trigger something from in a way from your childhood. It could trigger something from not in a bad way, but it can trigger something where you just go, oh my God, and you can join up the dots a lot more easily. Some of these things can just be more interesting for me to figure out why I'm doing what I'm doing. So classic kind of Simon Sinek territory. But also if I choose to talk about a subject, that maybe it's a bit more interesting when you've got my backstory. So one example would be I used to always get asked, why did I do accountancy? So, and I mean, I didn't really have a convincing answer. It might have just been because the money's good. I don't know. I mean, but it was bland and kind of boring, maybe just has no interest. And by just being part of Bernadette's group and being asked, or as a feedback, someone saying, well, I'm just not convinced that was the reason. And I was just made me think, well, maybe there was another reason. And I guess the reason I remember by just being kind of questioned or asked to think about it was, sitting at my parents' kitchen table when I was 12, and I have two brothers and a sister, so the six of us around the kitchen table, and my dad was trying to shut us all up because he wanted to listen to the news. It was on the television in the corner of the kitchen, and none of us shut up. Because in my household, if there's six people at the dinner table, there's seven conversations happening at the same time. So no one shut up. I didn't shut up quick enough. And my dad, who never shouts, never shouted. This was the only time he raised his voice to just shut us up. And he missed the news because we hadn't shut up quick enough. But it was his government department that he was part of was, this was 1987. The government department was being cut because the Irish economy was in the toilet and all these cuts were being made. So I could imagine at the time I was whisked back to the dinner table and I was thinking, I don't want to be sitting at a dinner table with my family having lost my job, because I was just thinking, can you not just get another job? But my dad was somebody who just worked in the government civil service. He wasn't somebody who would be happy or comfortable going out looking for jobs the way we all might be comfortable today. And he was 42 and I was 48 thinking about this. And I was just being whisked back to being a 12-year-old saying, well, I don't lose my job when I'm in my 40s. In Dublin, there was the phrase, you'll never see an unemployed accountant. And also thinking, what must my dad have been thinking in that moment, having a family of six and just this uncertainty about his job prospects. And it made a lot more sense for me to think that that was my origin story for choosing accountancy as a career path right back when I was 12 at a dinner table, rather than my previous unconvincing answer, which was, I think the money's good.
The money's good. And not only, Ciaran, not only does it make a lot of sense, it's also much more interesting to the listener. Thinking about your role in particular, if you share their story, not that you have to, but you may want to share their story at the beginning of a discovery call with a potential client, like why
Exactly.
you got into this, Okay, again, Simon Sinek, why we do what we do
Yeah.
is often for most people even more important and more interesting than what we do. And we've got just a couple of minutes and then we need to close. Let's close with this, Ciaran. What's the or what has been the ROI, the return on investment, if there was something on considering all the things that you've done over the last 5 years?
Oh, I would put, there's almost the financial ROI is, I can pick out people I'm working with today that I got on their radar because of the content or the subjects I've talked about. So if they want to hire an FD, they've instantly got what I will slot into their organization or their investment portfolio or something. So there's the ROI financially is, I would say, 90% of the fees I earned this year probably come from people who gravitated towards me because of me telling stories, which is quite powerful. But I think the non-financial ROI is even more powerful, which is I am actually putting myself out there in the first place and building relationships with people that I think are just more fun and maybe just a bit more authentic. And also I'm sharing vulnerability through some stories where I think that's more satisfying. It's not, we don't need to necessarily go through where everything has a financial ROI. It's the non-financial ROIs that almost make things more fun, relationships better, deeper, stronger, and also maybe more resilient. And yeah, just this kind of continuous personal development doesn't stop. So it's almost people come to you for advice on doing certain things, where I could look at myself and just point them back to where I started, that we're all on the set, like back to what we were saying, we're all on the same journey. For people to come to me, there's quite a nice ROI element to that as well.
Plus, you can also invite 100 people in your house, standing up in front of them and telling a compelling story. That's another.
And I did invite you. Just in case, yeah, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, back to the life event. These life events are, if it was a sad or happy occasion, this is a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah. Perfect. Ciaran, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your experience, your insights. I loved it.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like, so please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.